You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. What if living longer and better was simpler than we've been led to believe? Listen in today for a refreshing new perspective on longevity. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we explore the intriguing science behind living longer and healthier lives. Our guest shares insights into groundbreaking research that bridges nutrition and longevity, revealing how simple dietary adjustments can profoundly influence our health span. Renee Fitton is a leader in the intersection of nutrition, healthcare, and education. As Director of Education and Healthcare Sales at Prolon, she shapes sales strategies and equips healthcare practitioners with cutting-edge insights into nutrition and longevity. Her expertise in evidence-based practices and nutritional science has made her a trusted authority. Renee is dedicated to advancing the role of nutrition in revolutionizing healthcare, blending scientific rigor with a compassionate approach to wellness. Here is my interview with Renee Fitton. Hi, Renee. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because longevity made simple is such a curious topic. And myself, I want to know more, and I hope our listeners are just as excited. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a topic near and dear to my heart, something I talk about all day, every day. So I'm excited to share this with the listeners.
Absolutely. I feel like we all could use a little bit more longevity because as we get older, there tends to be more complaints and challenges that we have. So longevity is one of those things that I think a lot of people are thinking about. So this will be a fantastic thing to discuss today. Now, for starters, do you want to share maybe a little bit about yourself and your own journey or your own story and how that connects up with what you're doing today? And maybe share with our listeners also what it is that you do today.
Absolutely. So I am a longevity dietitian, and what the heck that means is that I actually have a master's degree in gerontology, or the study of aging and longevity, and specifically in the title of my master's program, which I got from USC, one of the only universities that has one of these longevity focused programs, is the term health span. So not just the ability to live longer, the concept of longevity, but the concept of living healthier longer, because nobody just wants to live longer and be sick and ill all of that time. Instead, we want to be thriving through all of our years that we get to look forward to. So I focus especially, of course, on nutrition for longevity. And as a dietitian, I have found some really incredible tools that really pack a punch, that can get you a lot of what we call biological age years back on to your side. So we'll talk about some of those strategies, but before I do, I'd love to share a little bit about what got me here. And I guess I'll start first by saying way back when I was still in my undergrad thinking about what I wanted to do, I was pretty darn sure that I wanted to be a doctor. And so I did all the things that you have to do. I still am quite A-type. So it was like, okay, so where do I have to volunteer? How many things do I have to do to make sure that I get into the best school doing the thing that I really want to do? And one of the things that I did was volunteer in an emergency room. And another thing that I did was to travel internationally and give aid. So I went to South Africa and I also went to Nicaragua. And in all of these experiences, something just kept being pointed out to me, which was the amount of medication that was being prescribed for lifestyle caused concerns. Even when I was traveling to these remote areas, we were carrying giant backpacks of medication and then going to these areas where, yes, absolutely, medication was going to have a huge impact and support a lot of these more acute conditions, but there were still lifestyle concerns that we really just needed to educate on some lifestyle changes that could really support long-term success and not just get there, do a quick fix and get out. All of these things kind of started bubbling up, and I started doing my own investigation, and nutrition really got a hold of me. And I started to just look into this more and more and more. And lo and behold, I decided to change gears, and I decided that I wanted to go into the world of nutrition. And as I was looking for my master's program in nutrition so that I could be a registered dietitian, which today requires a master's degree and about 1,200 hours of internship and all the extra bells and whistles to make sure that you know what you're talking about. I was lucky enough to find Dr. Walter Longo, who is recognized today as one of the leaders in longevity research. And he, of course, founded the longevity program at USC and has done now decades of research in the space of longevity nutrition. After studying with him, it was absolutely clear to me that there were some really great solutions that we could leverage. That honestly, the case that I'm going to be sharing today, about 15 days a year of intervention that can have about 2.5 years of biological age reversal from just those 15 days of intervention. I think that was really exciting to me and continued to support this belief that was now clinically validated by all of this research and science that lifestyle change can have a really big impact on our health, on our wellness, on our longevity, on our happiness. It doesn't always have to be a number. It can just be a feeling. So yeah, that's my story.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And you're getting me all excited because I feel like this is something doable. This is something we all can do. And with you talking about just some lifestyle changes, some things that we can easily, I'm guessing, fit into our busy lives, this sounds to me like a real way forward for people to age with health, to age with wellness, because these are, of course, some of the concerns that we are getting older, and being sick, as you said, is absolutely just takes out the quality of life as we're aging. So this is a really fantastic thing to hear. And I'm wondering, Renee, is this something that, because I feel like people really become aware of this longevity piece after something bad happens. Generally, they're not sitting there, and I was the same, not sitting there going, oh, I need to preventatively do things so I can age healthily. Usually it takes some sort of health scare or something bad that happens before we sit down and say, I really need to change something. I just want to ask, is this possible even for people that have not had the healthiest lifestyle, people that maybe are already a little bit older? Because we might not always think about that in our teenage years or 20s or even 30s to prepare as we are aging. So how does that all come together?
I love this question. And I would say it's never too late to make a change. And in fact, what we've done in some of the research, and especially some of this biological age research, is look at not just how this changes your biological age, but how it might change your risk for developing chronic disease and all of the major chronic diseases, right? And I think what's really important for people to recognize is that the biggest risk factor for these chronic diseases is not your genetics or even some of these lifestyle changes, but it's aging. As we age, we are more and more likely to develop these chronic diseases. So if we can try and limit aging, or at least our biological age, we can do a lot of really good things for our chronic disease risk. And when we look at the studies that look at how our disease risk drops, we see that with healthy individuals who do about 3 cycles a year of this nutrition intervention that we're going to be talking about. But when we see this 3 cycles a year for healthy individuals, we see a reduction about like anywhere from 4 to 25% risk reduction, depending on which chronic disease we're looking at. Now, If you have something out of range, meaning that you are already at risk because one of your biomarkers, maybe your blood sugar is already too high, or your blood pressure is already too high. Now, when we look at what that intervention does, it actually has an increased risk reduction because it is helping bring that back down. So the risk reduction that we see in individuals that already have a biomarker out of range is going to be closer to 7 to 35% risk reduction. So it's never too late. And in fact, we see even better results because there's more to change in individuals that are maybe veering a little bit out of that quote unquote healthy framework. So yeah, never too late.
That sounds really great. And listeners, so here we go. This is something that you can do at any age. You don't need to be a teenager to do this. I'm assuming you can do this at any time. So Renee, tell us a little bit about what exactly this is that you are talking about. And since you're a longevity dietitian, I'm assuming it also will involve something about diet and nutrition. So share a little bit about what this secret thing is that we all should know about.
Absolutely. The secret here is based on the principle of fasting. Now, I don't want everybody to close this on their browser or whatever they're listening on. Don't get it too afraid yet, because I'm not going to tell you that you have to do water-only fasting. In fact, there is now decades of research on the ability to get the incredible longevity benefits of significant calorie restriction fasting, which has now been shown time and time again on longevity, but to do this with food. You can actually get the benefits of these longer water-only fasts that have been shown to trigger deep cellular cleanup, incredible metabolic results, incredible weight loss results, but you can eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks every day for the period of time that you are doing what we call a fasting mimicking diet. That is what this kind of golden nugget is. It's the concept of fasting mimicking. And what we recommend is to try and do a 5-day fasting mimicking diet once every 3 to 4 months. And with that, that's where we are able to see these incredible results on all of these markers. And there's now over 40 clinical trials. There's about $40 million in NIH government funding into this research. The top research institutions in the world are doing research on this topic because of the incredible value that it brings. Because yes, I think we now have a pretty good understanding that water fasting has a lot of opportunity, but it only has opportunity if people are going to do it, which especially when we're telling people to do water fasts that are 3, 4, 5 days long. I mean, it's pretty tough to convince somebody to do that. So of course, adherence and likelihood of doing it goes up when we add food and nutrition. But also we see improved safety. The whole program of fasting mimicking was created for patients going through cancer therapy. They were looking for ways that they could make this protocol safer and more muscle protective in this population while still getting the benefits of fasting in that population. So that's really cool. And then on top of that, I kind of hinted at it, is this concept of muscle protection. When we look at water-only fasting, we oftentimes see muscle loss. And muscle is an incredibly important organ of longevity. It is important not only for looking good, but also for our immunity and just health generally. It's so important. We really want to make sure that we protect that, because once you lose it, it's really hard to get it back. Fasting mimicking also allows you to get that muscle protection. So really, it gives you, again, the wonderful benefits of water-only fasting without some of the downsides of water-only fasting. I'm happy to share a little bit about what a fasting mimicking diet would look like, what's included, things like that. But just in terms of the science, it is incredibly well validated.
This sounds really fascinating, and especially because some of the studies that I looked at, if you lose muscle mass as you're aging, it can be a marker for how quickly your health is going to decline. So this is, I think, a really fascinating point also for people as we're kind of moving along that aging line, to preserve the muscle mass that we do have and make sure that that carries us well into old age. Now, I see your point about the water fasting, that this could be really difficult for a lot of people. You throw in a family, responsibilities, work, all those things, and it could be incredibly difficult to coordinate all of that. If we're talking about fasting mimicking diets, then is this safe for, say, like a family to do this? So if you were to decide as a husband, wife, or a couple or partners to do this with your family for the ease of coordinating meals and things like that, is that possible to sort of get everyone involved? Is that safe even for younger people to do this?
Very important question. And the answer is generally no. We wouldn't really recommend this for anybody under the age of 18. And we generally don't recommend it for anybody over the age of 90. And even at the age of 65, we want to be very careful and make sure that you have doctor sign off, meaning that you're generally healthy, you have good muscle tone, and you're entering into this fast in a generally healthy state. So the kind of sweet spot for this is going to be 18 to 65, and then with an extended kind of with doctor approval up to about 18 to 90. So outside of that range, we probably wouldn't recommend this. And importantly to note, the reason why in the under 18 population that we wouldn't recommend this is that the whole concept of fasting and fasting mimicking is that our body really is deciding between two things: either growth mode, where it's building and just creating more, or repair mode, rejuvenation, stress resistance mode. And it's very seldomly doing both in any significant capacity. So it's kind of like a scale. And for people under the age of 18, growth is really a very important part of life, right? They're growing, they're building up all of the important things that they're going to need for the rest of their lives. Now, once we reach about the age of 18, if we just keep growing, instead of growing positively, we're oftentimes growing this way. We're growing in terms of a fatty liver. We're growing in terms of just accumulating misfolded and broken proteins and organelles. And it's really just accumulating waste. It's not beneficial growth. And that's why once we hit 18, we want to dive into these deep fasts, these fasts that are over 3 days, where we can trigger this process known as autophagy, this deep cellular cleanup that allows our body to essentially, I like to think of it like a vacuum cleaner for our cells, or an internal doctor for our cells, that goes in and scavenges for these misfolded proteins and these things that we've accumulated naturally over time. You can't really get away from it. You just need to make sure that you take the time to do the spring cleaning, which is autophagy, or these longer fasts that are at least 3 days, but ideally about 5 days long. That's kind of the magic point. Now, I'm sure that this brings up the question for our families out there thinking, okay, well, if my kids can't do it, then how am I going to be able to manage this? And the beauty is that, and I strongly recommend a fasting mimicking kits that will arrive at your door with absolutely everything that you need: breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, already there. The only thing that you need to add is water for hydration. That's it. Everything else is there. So it really makes your meals easy and your life easy. And then what I also recommend for families is, before you start your program on like the Sunday or the Saturday, do a meal prep, get all your kids' meals kind of ready to go so that either you or they can grab things, throw them in and heat them up and be ready to go. And they only need to do that for 5 days. It makes it really, really easy to support your kids with what they want to eat for those 5 days, but also support you in following the fasting mimicking program for those 5 days.
Thank you for sharing that, because I feel like that could be a stumbling block for a lot of people who are very busy, is to try and plan out various different meals for various different family members. So I think that could be a really good way to go. Meal prep, of course, will make that 5 days go by. And since we're not really talking about 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, I think 5 days could be a manageable chunk that people can do this in. Is this fairly safe for everyone to do? You said this was originally developed for people going through cancer treatment. So if we're talking about people with celiac or IBS or Crohn's, various different kind of issues, is that still safe to do this protocol?
Great question. So I would say One, in terms of celiac, we're completely gluten-free. When we're talking about the pre-made kits, the ones that I generally recommend are going to be either Prolon or Nutra Health. They make these 5-day kits all ready to go, delivered to your door. They are gluten-free, they're soy-free, they're fully plant-based, really, really clean. So for most people, it shouldn't be a problem, with the exception of people who have allergies to nuts. So that would be one exception that wouldn't be able to move forward. Now, in terms of safety, yes, it is designed to be incredibly safe, as you mentioned, with the origination of the kit being for individuals with cancer. Now, important to note that the Prolon kits and the Nutra Health kits, for example, the Prolon kits are designed for longevity, healthy aging, maybe weight loss, skin health, generally healthy individuals. When we get into metabolic health concerns, you want to work with a physician, you want to work with a dietitian, and that's what Nutra Health does. That's a company that will add labs and they'll add medication management, and they've actually been able to support individuals with type 2 diabetes come off of medication, drop their A1C at levels that are equivalent to medication, and really get people into what we call remission, where they no longer need to take medication at all, and their disease is now considered generally healed. This is, really incredible stuff for individuals with metabolic health concerns. And even if you don't know if you have a metabolic health concerns, we know that 93% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. So the likelihood that you are metabolically unhealthy is unfortunately pretty high, but you can change that with programs like Nutra Health. So they make it even safer for any individual that might have a metabolic health concern. Now, you mentioned Crohn's, which I think was an interesting call out, because we do have some early research in fasting mimicking showing that there is an opportunity here with Crohn's, but also just generally IBD, multiple sclerosis, type 1 diabetes. These are all autoimmune conditions. And I have to be very careful here because this is really early research. They're mice model trials in most cases. There's now coming out with some human trials for example, some of the IBD conditions that we've been looking at, but it's still early. So it's really important, if you're thinking about leveraging fasting mimicking for a medical condition that is outside of the world of metabolic health, which I would strongly recommend Nutra Health. But if you're looking outside of that, then work with a practitioner and make sure that they support you through this and make sure that they sign off on it and that they understand the science of fasting mimicking. But it can be, I guess, is the important thing here.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like this could be very beneficial for a lot of different challenges that we encounter, because so much of it centers around how we nourish ourselves. And unfortunately, when we get busy, very often that doesn't go the best way that it could. So this is very, very interesting. Now, these companies that you're mentioning that make kits that will make this obviously a lot easier for people to do, is this available only in the US, or for our international listeners, are there options internationally as well?
In fact, Prolon, which was founded by Dr. Valter Longo originally, or I should say the larger corporation was founded by him, and he now primarily focuses on a nonprofit called Create Cures that focuses on leveraging fasting and fasting mimicking for individuals with severe health concerns. So that whole umbrella was created by Dr. Valter, who is Italian. And so we have a very big group in Europe. So all of Europe is covered. We also have now distribution in some parts of Asia, as well as Australia, Canada, and I think that's it for now. I hope I didn't miss anybody, but there's quite an international reach. And for anybody that has a difficult time getting it, I always recommend, there's now some really cool tools that will allow you to ship something to somewhere in the US, and then they'll ship it to wherever in the world you are. So I always recommend that too.
Yeah, great idea. So take us through a little bit what this would look like. So whether we do a kit, or can people do this without a kit as well? Can they put this together themselves if they so choose? And what would that look like if we're preparing for 5 days? And you said we have a breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So what would we be looking at over that time span?
Great question. So I personally always recommend the pre-made kits. And there's a reason behind that, because the fasting mimicking diet, it's not just about low calories. It's really important that we recognize that. It is based off of the science that at the cellular level, we essentially have alarm bells at the cellular surface. They're actually called nutrient sensing pathways that are looking for nutrients in specific amounts. And when those nutrients are present in high enough amounts, it says, oh, we're not on a fast. It's time to grow. But when we live underneath this threshold for these specific nutrients in specific amounts, then we're able to remain in a fasted state. So you can imagine, after 30 years of research and trying to figure out exactly what triggers these nutrient sensing pathways, it is not as simple as just grabbing any vegetable in any amount and any fat in any amount. It really is very, very specific, to the point where with the kits, for example, you cannot add or remove anything. You can't switch things between days. Is very, very particular. So for that reason, I would just be hesitant to do it myself out of fear that I might add something that does in fact kick us out of a fast. Now, that being said, it is certainly hypothetically possible to make it yourself. Dr. Valter Longo actually has a book called The Longevity Diet, where he has a page where he kind of roughly outlines how you would organize your meals for the day. That's the long answer, but the short answer is it's hypothetically possible, but I personally would not recommend it, as it is just too risky to possibly kick you out of a fast by choosing the wrong ingredients, even in the wrong amounts. You might pick the right ingredients and you might pair them perfectly with one another, but they might still kick you out of a fast if you have too much or add something a little awry. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess that's why those kits exist. So what are people looking at eating then during this time? I'm guessing our listeners are probably curious now as to what do we get to eat in these kits, or do we get to eat anything, or is it just flavored water that we have to do for 5 days? So what would they be looking at? Give us a rough kind of overview what a day could look like when you're doing one of these kits, for example.
The best part about these kits is that it's not just flavored water or liquid broths, etc. In fact, the major triggers that will kick you out of a fast with the least amount of those nutrients are going to be protein and simple sugars, which are two of the most common fake fasts that I see out there: juice fasts and bone broth fasts. And both of those, I always cringe when I hear them, because they are very likely to kick you out of a fast and trigger those nutrient sensing pathways. The fasting mimicking kits that you'll find from Prolon and from NutriHealth focus around a plant-centric program. It is quite low in protein, but importantly, it's only low in protein for those 5 days. Outside of those 5 days, you should be consuming a regular amount of protein. But during this 5 days, to keep you in this fasted state, it's going to be a low protein consumption, primarily from plant-based sources. So you'll see a lot of nuts in the kit, for example. And it's also going to be very low in simple sugars and very high in fiber. So what does that look like in practice? You'll typically start your day with a nut-based bar. It even has a little bit of honey. A lot of people think this is super, super tasty. In fact, Prolon has even made everyday bars like that they call the fasting bar, because people love them so much. So that's your breakfast. Then you'll transition to a snack. Snack could be anything from a pack of olives. These are whole olives that you can eat and chew with. They're flown in directly from Italy with Italian herbs and spices and extra virgin olive oil. So really, really tasty. Even if you don't like olives, I would say that these ones are quite impressive. The other snacks that you might see are going to be kale crackers. And when people think kale crackers, they think of those flimsy pieces of kale that have been dehydrated. Not these. These are made with nuts and seeds and then some kale. And so it's a whole cracker. So again, quite hearty. And then what you'll see for lunch and then for dinner are going to be a soup. So you'll see we have tons of different flavors. You'll see things like tomato, minestrone, even some cool flavors like lentil curry or carrot ginger. And you can pick your flavors depending on what resonates with you. And then there's even at the end of the day, something called the Choco Crisp, which is like a little chocolate bar at the end of the day. So you really do get all sorts of delicious things throughout the day. I will never lie. It is still going to be relatively calorie restricted. We see about 1,100 calories on day one, which most people find pretty darn easy. And then on days 2 through 5, we see about 750 or so calories. So it's still calorie restricted, but it's way more than you would see on any water only fast.
Yeah. Fascinating. And do people get lightheaded and things like that when they first do this? Because I feel like if we're going on a fast, that might happen, especially if we're used to exercising or spending energy during the day. How does all of that come together? Can people still exercise? Is that risky during those 5 days? What would be the recommendation there?
Great question. So, in terms of common symptoms that we see with fasting, they can be pretty wide ranging with water only fasting. Now, when we go into fasting mimicking, we always test in all of the clinical studies for something called adverse events. These are things that are essentially negative symptoms of fasting, right? And what we've shown time and time again is that the only symptoms that you see are very mild symptoms. So these are things like a light headache, maybe a little bit of lightheadedness, but not severe. Maybe even just like a sense of nausea, which can happen because we're shifting into ketosis. But these are all very short lived. So they're not going to happen throughout all of the 5 days. They might just happen for like a couple of minutes on one of the days. But the symptoms are very, very mild, if present at all. Most people, I would say, don't experience any symptoms except for mild hunger, which might happen maybe on day 2 or day 3. But even come day 4 and 5, usually what we see is that people are just coasting. You've really gotten into this routine and your body has sunken into this and is really, really happy. And what we typically see more common, what I hear is on day 4, 5, and even 6, increased alertness, increased energy, increased ability to sense. So I've noticed improved sense of smell, more clarity in vision, better taste. And in fact, the sense of smell and taste has even been clinically shown to improve after fasting mimicking diets, which is a really cool brand new study that was just published. In terms of symptoms, I would say very moderate. And in fact, usually I see more positive than negative anyway. And then you asked about exercise. So in terms of exercise, we do recommend that people limit their exercise. Now, on purpose, fasting is a stress, but it is what we call a hermetic stress or a positive stress. And that stress, while positive and while producing all of these incredible changes in our body that are producing cleanup and repair, is still a stress. And so is exercise. So is going in a cryotherapy booth. So is going in an infrared sauna. These are all stressors on your body. And so when we go into a fast, even a fasting mimicking diet that is designed to be less stressful on the body, we want to try and limit the additional stressors that we add at that same time. Keep in mind, I'm asking for 5 days at a time, a total of 15 days a year. I think for most people, transitioning to a lower intensity exercise for those 5 days, it's usually pretty manageable. My rule of thumb is if you can try and limit to exercise that doesn't break a sweat. So light yoga, stretching, walking, things like that, that is great. And in fact, I recommend that people do include those into their fast. Make sure you are moving a little bit. It will help all of the incredible cleanup kind of flush out through your body. So keep exercise moderate to minimum during the fast.
Yeah, I think you'll be busy around the fast anyways, trying to organize. So do some yoga, do some stretching, take care of yourself, take that as your self-care week that you're doing. So yeah, but it sounds like there are amazing benefits to this without so much stress that could happen in a water-only diet or even, as you said, a juice fast and things like that. So this sounds like a wonderful option for people to take care of themselves. And it's really only 15 days a year that we're talking about. I'm hoping that that actually sounds reasonable to our listeners and sounds like something they might want to even just try and see how they feel after the 5 days. Now, we're going to be linking to a whole bunch of, I'm guessing, resources and products in the show notes, but tell us a little bit about how our listeners can connect with you and what kind of resources you have available for them. Can they work with you, or is there someone they can work with if they have questions? So how can they connect with you if they are curious now about this fasting mimicking diet?
Absolutely. So if you want to connect directly with me, you're welcome to reach out to me on Instagram at Fitton Nutrition. That's Fitton Nutrition. But I strongly recommend exploring more on fasting mimicking on the two sites that I had mentioned. So either Prolon, if you're just looking for longevity and maybe some slight little tweaks, weight loss, skin health, things like that. That's going to be at prolonlife.com, Prolon life.com. If you want that additional support, if you have any metabolic health concerns, if you want to work with a dietitian and a physician, go check out lnutrahealth.com. So that's L-Nutra health.com. And you'll be connected directly with somebody that you can even chat with somebody and talk through some of the programs that are available. On both of the sites, you'll find resources on all of the research. You'll find all these incredible blogs on fasting and fasting mimicking. You'll find links to YouTube videos and all of the good stuff. So please dig into it, learn more. There's so much to know in this world, and it's really incredibly beneficial for your health and your health span.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And of course, as I said, we will be linking to all of Renee's resources in the show notes as well. So you can check there for the links that she just mentioned, and also connect with her on Instagram if you have questions, if you're curious. And if what we talked about today has sparked something in you where you might be thinking, hey, I should try this, or maybe you know somebody who wants to try this, be sure to connect and give yourself that time to care for yourself a few times a year. Do the spring cleaning, do the fall cleaning, as Renee mentioned. Take care of your body. And I believe that you will move forward into aging with a lot longer health and longevity, which is, I think, what we're all after as we get older. So thank you, Renee, for sharing all this valuable information, all this wisdom that you have gathered with our listeners and with myself. This has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you for taking the time to join me today and share all that with us.
Thank you so much for having me. And I hope that I get to connect with all of your listeners and get to continue to share more of this information. Share it with all your friends and family. It's super valuable information, I hope.
Absolutely. And you can always share this episode. You can share Renee's links. You can share what you find online as well, the studies, the videos. And I'm just really hopeful that we can age more gracefully with a lot of quality of life, because if we are restricted to not being able to do the things we want to do as we age, it causes a lot of mental health challenges and physical health challenges. So here is a piece of the wellness for you from Renee. And thank you so much for being here today, and take really great care of yourself, Renee.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejōrni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.